What's up, guys, and welcome to Movie Emporium's Flashback Reviews, where I take movies from the past, break them down, and tell you what I think about them. If you like what you see, of course, hit the subscribe button. Join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell at the top to find out what's coming next, and comment below on any video that you watch on my channel. So, when you think about your childhood, you think about the one word that envelops everyone. It's nostalgia. And nostalgia is a pretty powerful thing, is a pretty powerful tool, because it brings us back to a time when we were kids, when we used to sit in front of the TV or sit in front of a book or a video game, so on and so forth, and just remember how it made us feel, how excited we got. And when you think about it, when you go back to any generation, there's that one seminal movie, one seminal TV series that really kind of gets you in that place of remembering things when you were young. And it doesn't mean that every movie or every TV show is going to be great. It's just something that kind of envelops your heart, envelops your soul, envelops the way you kind of look at things in the world. And with the idea of nostalgia playing a huge effect in the world of entertainment today, it's more powerful than ever. So I'm going through my James Bond series, and I'm looking also for films to talk about in the future. And I went to 1990. This is 30 years of this year. And I was looking for a film to talk about that kind of made me feel nostalgic, and I came across Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is an interesting film because it is, one, a very nostalgic film for a lot of people, including myself, but it is a film that actually kind of still holds up today, which is kind of fascinating. Yes, it's really dark and it would scare a lot of kids, but for a film that's 30 years old, that's kind of funny and kind of interesting. And Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, as we all know, was originally created by Peter Laird and Kevin Eastman. It was about a group of amphibian creatures that got mutated, and they were able to learn the ways of ninja by this rat who also got mutated, who's called Splinter. And they fought various, warriors and creatures and so on and so forth. Their main bad guy was the Shredder. He had a thing called the Foot Clan, who was his army. And it was just a very dark comic, but it was a very interesting, nostalgic thing to read, and it became extremely popular. If you've seen The Toys That Made Us, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And so the animated TV series came out in the late 80s, and it was very, very popular. And so they decided they were going to make a live action movie out of it. But at the time, the idea of the very dark Ninja Turtles and kind of the lighthearted TV series was kind of a push off or a step off for most movie studios. This project was shopped everywhere from Disney to Warner Brothers to Universal. Nobody wanted it, and of course the small startup company who had been doing grade B horror films and so on and so forth, New Line Cinema, picked it up, and Golden Harvest was involved with the production, which is a production studio. And they went to Jim Henson, who's known for doing stuff like The Muppets, and of course, Fraggle Rock, a very famous guy, the Dark Crystal and Labyrinth. The guy is really a genius. He's like the Stan Winston of the puppetry world. And they hired a director called Steve Barron, and they had a couple writers. So with a shooting budget of $13.1 million, and it was shooting in North Carolina to make it look like New York City, because New York City is very expensive. On March 31st, 1990, they released this film, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the live action edition. Now, to say this movie was a huge gamble is an understatement. At the time, the biggest superhero comic book movies to ever be released were Batman and, of course, Superman. But it's not like it was today. These movies were never expected to make any money. They were laughingstocks. You have 4 turtles, a rat named Splinter, and this guy named Shredder. I mean, who thinks this movie's gonna make a lot of money? And this movie made a lot of money. And this movie made $134 million just in the States alone, and $200 million worldwide. This was one of the biggest movies of the year. Of course, movies are making way more than that today, but think about 1990 when movie ticket prices are way cheaper. The idea and most of the budget was going towards marketing and stuff like that. So it was a huge hit. It made a lot more money. $13.1 million. You spend another $20 million in marketing. You got yourself a gigantic hit. It makes a lot of money. They put out a sequel a year later. But this movie is fascinating to watch. It's not perfect. It's very 1990-ish, late 80s, early 1990s, with the aesthetic of New York City, with the aesthetic of the kids, with the aesthetic of just everything that's going around. You look at the TVs, you look at, Danny, who's the kid in this movie, he has a Walkman and stuff like that. So this movie is just a really fascinating thing to watch. And it honestly is basically about this character named Raphael. And Raphael is one of the Ninja Turtles, but he's kind of the center focus in the beginning of this movie, because we have the opening of this movie, and the movie basically is telling us about what is going on in New York City. We have this crime syndicate called the Foot, which is kind of a myth at this point. Nobody knows what's going on, but everything around the city, there's a lot of theft going on. People are stealing wallets, people are stealing TVs. People are just stealing everything, and it's done by, a mysterious group of people, and nobody can figure it out. And this leads to just like cool montages of a very early 1990s New York City before, the city was re-cleaned over and kind of made what it is into today. And we have basically this lair, this place where all these kids are hanging out, where they can play video games, they can drink, they can smoke, they can gamble, they can do whatever they want, because it's kind of like a very, very bad version of Neverland, where the kids don't grow up, but they're trained to be kind of bad guys. So that when they grow older, they turn into like Foot Clan members. They're being basically shepherded by this character named Tatsu, who is, underneath the Shredder himself. And it's just a very fascinating look at gangs of New York in essence, and really kind of a more fantastical approach, but more kind of realistic in its nature compared to like what the TV show did or even what the comic books did. But this portion of the movie, it leads us to basically Judith Hoag, who plays April O'Neil, and she's one of the characters in the comic book. She is doing a news story, and she's leaving her, news office and stuff like that, which is really kind of stupid because she should have somebody watching her and going with her, because she is more of the kind of center focus. She's like the bullet target to kind of this Foot Clan, because she's very vocal about what's going on. And so she runs into a bunch of thugs, a bunch of Foot Clan members who are stealing stuff off the news truck. And she is trying to get away. She gets captured because she's going to be taken down by the Foot Clan. And somebody saves her. We have the lights go out. We hear a bunch of noises and stuff like that. People fighting. We wake up, and of course, April O'Neil's fine. The police show up, and this is where we see the Sai of Raphael. And basically, Raphael gets mad because he left the Sai out there. He can't go get it. And this, of course, leads us into the introduction of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which is Leonardo, Donatello, Raphael, and Michelangelo. What's kind of cool about these characters is not only do they have their own personalities, but they are characters kind of modeled after the four Renaissance painters, who were, of course, the main painters of history. But I just like the fact that they're given those names because Splinter is a well-versed rat who knows a lot of stuff. It's kind of a really cool thing. But Raphael is just really angry that he lost his Sai. We enter their lair, which is kind of this like underground in the sewers, which is kind of cool because, they're turtles and stuff like that. And the dichotomy and the kind of way these characters interact with each other is really cool. One has like swords, one has sais, one has nunchucks, one has a bow staff. But they are very kind of because they're teenagers, they have like a very outlandish personality. Like Michelangelo is a very surfer dude type guy. Leonardo is like the leader. Raphael is the hothead. And of course, Donatello is the smart guy. And it basically, they have their own thing. And of course, Splinter is trying to keep them in line and so on and so forth to keep them in check. Basically, they need to meditate on what they did. And, they have to learn their mistakes and so on and so forth. Raphael gets mad. And Splinter says, "You've lost the Sai. There's nothing we can do about it." But Raphael can't handle it. And he basically goes and watches a movie, which is kind of cool. I think that's fine. The fact that this Ninja Turtle is dressing up in a jacket and a hat, and he's somehow able to go. I guess it's New York City, so there's a lot of weird people in New York. But he's able to go and kind of, watch this movie called Critters, which is awesome because Critters came out in the early 90s. I think one of them had like Leonardo DiCaprio or something like that. But I just like the small moments in these sequences, because Splinter, who is of course the master of these turtles, and the fact that he has a past with the Shredder that we eventually hear about is kind of fascinating. And then we have, of course, Raphael coming out of the movie. He saves a woman for her purse from getting mugged and stuff like that. They jump over, of course, the wall, and that's where we meet Casey Jones, who is played by Elias Koteas. And Elias Koteas is, a very fun, very well-known actor at this point, but of course he was very young, and he steals the entire movie, to be fairly honest. I think Splinter is also a great character in this movie, but because of what Elias Koteas is doing, how he acts, he's very of a New York character type. The fact that he wears a hockey mask, he has some hockey equipment and stuff like that, like a hockey stick and whatnot. It's just a really fun character. It plays really well. It plays really well off April O'Neil and the Turtles. It's just a really fun character. And then, of course, Casey Jones and Raphael have their moment where they're fighting each other, and Casey Jones, gets away. There's a few choice words that Raphael says, like damn and stuff like that in this movie, which is kind of funny because that's, in this era of children's filmmaking, you can say shit and damn and stuff like that and get away with it, but you can't really do now. But this basically leads to April O'Neil trying to push for more information from the chief of police of New York. The chief of police of New York is very corrupt in this movie. You can tell it's a very of its era, of its time, where the city of New York and the city of the police department was not looked upon very well. And it was very fascinating to watch because she's trying to get information out of him and he's not willing to give the information, and he yells at April O'Neil. And of course, the head of the news department, that April O'Neil, I think Channel 5 or something like that, he's just a character that is just doesn't really have any balls. And so when he is kind of confronted with situations, he doesn't want to respond to it. He wants to kind of bury it. And it all comes into play when Danny, of course, gets arrested, and he basically, the chief of police, because he knows that his son, says, you have to take her off this news story or your son is going to go to jail, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of protecting your kid, but not upholding the truth of what news reporting is really about. But in the essence, April O'Neil is mugged by the Foot Clan because the Foot Clan themselves, including Shredder, want her silenced. And once again, Raphael rescues April O'Neil from the Foot Clan and takes her to his lair, or his underground sewer housing apartment, whatever. And this is where April O'Neil is officially introduced to the Ninja Turtles, to Splinter. Of course, she freaks out, passes out, wakes up again. And this is where we learn the story of how the Ninja Turtles came into be, which of course is the ooze, and how they got wrapped into it, because the ooze we learned about in the second movie was kind of thrown and kind of disposed of in the wrong way. So they grow and they become Ninja Turtles, and they, of course, are trained by Splinter, who of course grows and becomes who he is now. And it's just a really kind of fun sequence. I'll be honest with you, it's not like the best sequence. Most of these sequences in the movie aren't the best in the world, but they're fun. You kind of have good times with them and stuff like that. But we get the back history of the Ninja Turtles. It's done in a clever way. All the Ninja Turtles get their moments and really cool ideas and stuff like that. And April O'Neil is all of a sudden accepting of this weird nature, this almost sci-fi style nature of these Ninja Turtles. And as they're up in April O'Neil's apartment eating pizza, the Foot Clan kidnaps Splinter and takes him to the hideout where all these kids are at. And the Ninja Turtles end up staying at April O'Neil's apartment, which is, of course, above a antique store and so on and so forth. So this leads to probably, this movie's only like 90 minutes long, so this leads to the middle of the movie, about 45 minutes into it. Raphael, because he's the hothead, is getting anxious. He wants to find Splinter, but he's not doing it in the most common way. He's just really kind of just wanting to go after it. Leonardo's like, you have to be patient, we'll find him. But they have their argument, and Raphael goes to the roof, where he starts, practicing, starts letting off a lot of steam. And of course, because the Ninja Turtles have been kind of found out because they know where they're at, we end up with this sequence where Raphael is basically getting the crap kicked out of him. And this turns into a big fight because Raphael is knocked out and knocked through the window of this apartment complex. And they start doing this crazy fight through the apartment complex that goes into, of course, the antique store. Tatsu and of course his Foot Clan are there, and they light the place on fire. And in the process, Casey Jones sees Raphael getting hurt. I don't know how Casey Jones just happens to be there at that particular moment, but he gets involved in the sequence. He starts fighting. He backs up Raphael because Raphael and stuff like that. And they have this great moment where Casey Jones basically allows the Ninja Turtles to get out, and Casey Jones escapes. But the whole place, April O'Neil's apartment and her antique store, which was her father's stuff, basically goes up in flames, and they basically go on the run to this farmhouse. And of course, while the Ninja Turtles and Raphael, who's still knocked unconscious, we have on the other side, we have Danny, who officially is introduced to Splinter, and they start to develop a relationship. And Danny, because he's a young kid, he doesn't know any better, he starts to learn from Splinter, starts to learn that maybe where he's going, maybe the ideas of the Foot Clan are not what he's supposed to be doing. So it's kind of a really kind of fascinating look at a character who has so many problems, has so many issues, and is being taught by a rat, which is kind of funny if you think about it, but it's really kind of clever, and it's story time. But on the other side, we of course have the Ninja Turtles, where about 15 to 20 minutes of this movie takes place, where they're stuck at this house. April O'Neil and Casey Jones are having their back and forth as a almost like romantic couple type situation, which I don't really care too much about. I think it's fun that they fight, but then they're all of a sudden like happy-go-lucky with each other. And then of course, Raphael wakes up and it leads them to basically doing a meditative state where they basically learn that Splinter's still alive. This gets into like mysticism and stuff like that, which is really strange for a movie that is trying to be kind of realistic and centered, even though it's about mutated turtles. So the fact that like Splinter in his ability and power, stuff like that, can talk to the Ninja Turtles and stuff like that, it's really weird, I guess you could say. It's really strange, but it's not like the worst thing in the world. It's just the mysticism thing just doesn't really play out in a more realistic setting. If you had this in like the animated TV series or something like that, or maybe the Michael Bay crap that came out, I guess that could work, but yeah, it's just really strange. This basically is the Ninja Turtles basically going back. They've decided they've had enough, and they go back to their, sewer lair and so on and so forth. Danny goes in the middle of the night, and Casey Jones follows him, and they go to the hideout. And this is basically where Shredder learns that the Ninja Turtles are still alive, and that he sends the Foot Clan to go after them, which leads into the last act of this movie, about an hour into the movie. But there's some really nice moments. There's moments where Casey Jones and Danny rescue Splinter. Tatsu is there, and Casey Jones gets the upper hand with having a golf club and stuff like that. And this is a scene where we see Sam Rockwell. Sam Rockwell's been through this movie a lot. It's kind of fascinating to see because he's like the head thug, so it's really kind of cool to see a guy who would become a big named actor later on, kind of in this small role, but kind of integral to kind of getting these kids to realize that they've made mistakes. So they follow Casey Jones, Splinter, and Danny, and he gets all of them to go to like the area where the fight will end up taking place. And of course, the Foot Clan Ninja Turtles fight one another. They go from the sewer to the main street to the eventual rooftop where they fight the Shredder. There's a lot of great sequences. There's a lot of great moments. There's a lot of great comedic jokes. There's what Michelangelo is doing with some of the foot soldiers, and how Raphael is taken care of, and Donatello and Leonardo and whatnot. It's just a really great, fun, memorable sequence for this movie that is not the greatest in the world, but you enjoy it. And so this leads to the confrontation that, as we were kids, we've all been waiting for. Remember in the animated series, the fight against the Shredder is something that doesn't happen until like 14 minutes before the movie's supposed to end. But it's the exciting moment. It's the thing that we've been waiting for. And I'll be fairly honest, it's not the most exciting action sequence. There's a lot of just Ninja Turtles just fighting one-on-one with the Shredder and getting their ass kicked. And then they like huddle together and the Shredder's just kind of standing there. And it's like when you're playing that video game where you have a bunch of bad guys around you and you're just fighting the one bad guy and nobody's doing anything. That's what's happening in this sequence, where we have the Shredder just kind of standing there. And it's like you want more kind of action and more nuance in your fighting sequence. But the Shredder just takes on one by one, beats them all like 3 or 4 times, and they're done out for the count. The Shredder puts his staff up to Leonardo's throat, and that's where we get the Splinter. And of course, we learned earlier in this movie about who the Shredder really is, who is a Rokusaki, and Splinter was a pet of this character, who basically got in a love triangle with a Rokusaki, and the woman and Splinter and his master went to America. Rokusaki ran to them in America and killed the master and the woman, and Splinter gave Rokusaki or Shredder the scar, and we of course see the scar in the sequence when the Splinter is confronting. And as the sequence plays out, of course, the Shredder uses his bow staff to try and kill Splinter, but Splinter has recovered these nunchucks that Michelangelo had thrown over to kind of keep Leonardo from being killed. And it leads to Splinter basically using the nunchucks to basically able to push the Shredder over the side of the building, which leaves him dangling. And the Shredder, of course, being the stupid guy that he is, thinks he's going to get the upper hand on Splinter and tries to use a knife to throw at him. Splinter catches it, loses his grip on the nunchucks, and Shredder falls into a dump truck. And the most disturbing sequence in this entire movie is seeing Casey Jones basically use the dump truck's thing that presses all of the garbage in to do that on, of course, Shredder, which almost seems like he killed Shredder, so he's almost like a murderer. So that's kind of weird and a little dark, I guess you could say. And yeah, April O'Neil gets her job back. She ends up kissing Casey Jones, and the Ninja Turtles are happy. They say radical, they say Calabunga. And we get her song at the very end of this movie, which was very prominent in the 90s. And yeah, That, of course, is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the movie. It's not the most coherent movie in the world, but it's a movie that is very just fun to watch. I mean, if you can turn your brain off and you really don't look at like the plot problems and the ideas of the fact that everybody's so accepting of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and accepting of who these characters are, and the fact that these kids who guarantee they have parents, their parents are not looking for them. You know, Danny kind of runs away, and yeah, the father says he had the whole city looking for him, but did he really have the whole city looking for him? And it's really weird that this, you know, lair that the Foot Clan had was never discovered by the police, which makes me think the police chief was corrupt and he was being paid off by the Foot Clan and stuff like that. So I mean, that could be, I mean, it's just, who knows, but it's just really kind of weird. Is there's like the whole idea of the Ninja Turtles just living underground and never being caught and never being seen. It's another real plot point that can be a problem. And of course, you have very iconic voice work in this movie. When you go back and you really kind of think about it, and when you kind of listen to it, you're like, oh my god, I remember that. I think that's part of the nostalgia of having these voices of, you know, Ryan Tochi and Robbie Rist and Josh Pais, who actually did some of the suit work, and Corey Feldman, who is known for being very, very popular in the 80s, and Kevin Clash, who did Splinter. And these voices are just, they're ingrained in your memory, especially if you grew up on this movie. And I think that's why it makes it so iconic. That's why you can go past the problems that are in this movie, the problems with the, you know, shooting and so on and so forth and whatnot. But it's just a very iconic movie. You know, watching these characters, watching these suits, watching these people in these suits, you know, how they act and how they fight, the fact that it's all live action stuff, it really gives it a sense of more wonder than even the animated TV series did. And that's why it was so popular for kids of my age, and even kids today who go back and watch it, who may find it a little cheesy, but you can kind of get some like sentimental value out of it. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it on this flashback review of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It's pretty amazing that the movie's 30 years old. It's kind of scary because it really does make you feel old, especially if you're my age. So that's it. That's my take on the 30th anniversary of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Happy anniversary. Let me know in the comments below what you think of this movie. Do you like it? Do you not like it? What do you think about the Ninja Turtles in general? But anyways, hit that subscribe button to join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell at the top to find out what's coming next. And comment below on any videos you're watching my channel. Otherwise, we'll see you guys on the next video. Peace out. What's up, guys? Thank you so much for checking out Movie Emporium. I really appreciate it. If you want to, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification button and the bell at the top. Find out what's coming next for Movie Emporium. Also, check out these 2 videos. They're amazing. I think they're awesome. I think you'll enjoy them too. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.